Okay, David Johnston, how are you?
I'm doing great. Good to be here in Austin, Texas.
Awesome, wonderful. Yeah, well, thanks for making the time. So, if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, I remember we actually met, I think, in 2015 at a hackathon in Shanghai.
hmm
And yeah, it was a hackathon. You know, you were pretty tired, and you'd just gotten off a plane, and obviously, when you're at a hackathon, you don't sleep. That's the point. So yeah, but it's good. It's good to see you again. And yeah, just go ahead and tell us who you are and how you got into the crypto space and what you're into nowadays.
Sure. So got into the crypto space in 2012. Really spent a lot of time in the industry the last 7 years on the investing side.
Hmm.
So ended up starting the first angel group in the space, Bit Angels, back in 2013.
Hmm.
And then that sort of led into all sorts of protocols and investments and Mastercoin protocol back in the day. The
Yeah.
first protocol to do assets, and back then they called them colored coins.
Hmm.
And eventually that became the Omni protocol, and Tether and billions of dollars of assets have been launched on it since. So pretty amazing to see sort of all that evolve. Ended up starting the first fund to do all tokens back in 2014, the DApps fund.
Hmm.
That's probably what most people know me from, is decentralized applications.
Okay.
So I coined the term back in December of 2013 for dApps and decentralized applications. I released a whole white paper sort of describing this idea of open source, blockchain based, peer to peer, tokenized platforms and calling those decentralized applications. So everybody was sort of working on terminology at the time. I remember Dan released his paper about decentralized autonomous corporations, or
Hmm.
DACs, uh, and then separately Charles was fomenting the idea of DAOs, right?
Hmm.
Decentralized autonomous organizations, and I was the guy pushing DApps. So DAX, DAOs, and DApps all sort of emerged in the end of 2013, and it's been cool to see sort of that whole idea and framework get so embraced, and now represent tens of billions of dollars of cool projects around the world. So yeah, anyway, these days I run a family office called Yeoman's Capital, and invest in early stage blockchain. We've made about 40 investments
Hmm.
across the industry. Polymath and Factum and you name it, we're involved in a lot of the early protocols. And so yeah, that's been pretty amazing. On the venture side, work with Multicoin Capital.
Hmm.
So I was the first investor and first person to invest in the GP there in August of 2017.
Hmm.
So they've come a long way since then and are one of the major funds in this space. And so work with those guys. And then on the sort of later stage stuff, YGC, or YGC Venture Studio, is all about connecting the enterprises with large public protocols and building on top, because we've ended up with a lot of experience in the enterprise space thanks to Factum and others that have all had all these big contracts. And so the idea there is, as projects mature, we need to get them real usage in the
Hmm.
wild, right? From these huge existing user bases that enterprises have. And the enterprises need the tech, right? They tried the private blockchain thing that didn't
Hmm.
really go anywhere. Um, so if they want the benefits of public blockchains, they have to be able to connect into public blockchains. And it's not easy for them to do that for a lot of reasons. And so YGC and the Venture Studio is building these new companies to support each of these use cases between an enterprise and a public protocol. So anyway, so that's me, all the way from funding startups in the seed
Right.
level to doing the venture thing to, working with enterprise on the top of the stack. So
So yeah, you're like a full stack investor. Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll have to use that, full stack investor. It's similar cred to being a full stack developer, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. You invest in early stage seed, you invest in late stage. That's awesome. That's really cool. That's very diverse, you know. I think you have to be a little bit more broad minded, you know, to take that approach. A lot of people, they want to specialize, you know, they want to snipe or they want to, do different kinds of specialities in terms of what they're working on. But it's cool that someone takes a big picture view.
Sure.
So
Well, you kind of have to think through the life cycle of a startup. If you can only help them at the seed stage, you can get them past that initial ideation and prototype development and stuff like that. I mean, that's important. But then you got to be able to help them go raise venture capital or expand the company. And when they're fully developed, you got to help them be able to get big enterprise customers, right? So it's sort of, I've been on a lot of these. I built 10 startups. I've been through 10 startups before I turned 30. So I've sort of been before I was an investor, I was a serial entrepreneur, right? So I've been on the other side of the table, and I know how much work it is, like 100-hour weeks that founders put in to get these things built. And I'm just trying to be the investor that I would have appreciated building those companies and, needing help with customers and capital and everything else. So I sort of ended up developing like a whole set of sort of ideas about, how to best build companies. I ended up writing a Medium post a year or two ago called 33 Rules to Build a Unicorn. And it was sort of taking all the things I learned from those startups. But I also sort of have a playbook of, everything that I can help a company with. So when I end up investing, I've got a 47-point checklist of like, okay, do you guys need lawyers? Do you need accountants? Do you need, tech partners? Do you need to break into Asia? Do you need to break into Europe? And so there's just ended up being this network effect benefit of having done this so many times that often they're not even aware of the solutions that exist for whatever problem they're involved in. A lot of times it's a set of great engineers building something, but they haven't, had to be exposed to all the business stuff. So anyway, I try to sit right in between the engineering side and the business side and have enough depth on both to sort of understand where both groups are coming from. So I often find myself as like the bridge between those two groups because they really speak different languages.
Yeah. You talk about 100-hour work weeks and stuff like that, but I mean, in your view, is that sustainable or is that just in the prototype phase? Because, there are some investors out there that do believe in, working 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. And they don't give a fuck about your personal life. And my view, honestly, is that's how you destroy a company. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Obviously you need that before the prototype gets launched, or when it's necessary. But if you want to destroy a company, you make it run in the red line like that for several years, and it just won't happen. I mean, I think that, what is your perspective on work-life balance?
So I think the reason most entrepreneurs end up with those crazy working hours is it's hard to avoid when you're capital poor. Right. So when you don't have any capital before the seed investment, it's really, you're funded by passion. People are working on their weekends, their evenings. They probably have a day job. A lot of times it's best to keep a day job because then you've got runway until you figure out what works. Right. And so they get into this sort of extreme work mentality, and that has its place for a certain amount of time. But like you said, if you don't get to a point where you take capital or invest your own capital or basically give yourself that bandwidth, you're going to burn through the social capital. So I was talking with a friend recently about this. Is there has to be a balance between social capital and financial capital, because you can recruit some friends to work this crazy startup life with you, but after a year or two, if you don't use some of the financial capital to then restore that social capital, you'll deplete that social capital, right? And then everybody gets burnt out and they leave, right? And so I tend to work a lot because I'm very passionate about this space. I believe so much in decentralization and the freedom and liberty that can bring the human race. So, but I've had to learn over time that, not everybody is at that level of, either time they can commit or even their risk tolerance,
Hmm.
right? People have different risk tolerances. My risk tolerance is really, really high. Like I
Okay.
converted every spare dollar I had into Bitcoin in 2012 because I believe in free market economics. I already didn't believe in the US dollar. And so for me, it was this amazing escape of, oh, wow, this is how I get out of the fiat
Hmm.
system and into
Hmm.
something that I believe in and I think is ethical. And so that's not a risk tolerance that most people have. And so
Right.
I can't necessarily push them uh, to that level. I can educate, I can explain, I can, reason with, why these are fundamentally honest systems and it's worth doing. But, it goes back to that same thing, right? You have to temper your expectations with partners and friends and family and people you involve that they're going to have different risk tolerances and they're going to have different levels of bandwidth and just learn to respect that and also balance yourself, right? I've got
Hmm.
a family. I like to see my family. I like my family.
Right.
So I've had to learn myself how to you know um, delegate is a big thing. That's a lot
Hmm.
of times hard for entrepreneurs
Hmm.
because they think they can do everything best themselves. And they might be right for like a short period of time. But if
Hmm.
you empower a partner or employee um, to do something, maybe they're not going to do it as well like the first day, but after a little while, they'll probably do it better than you because they've
Hmm.
got more bandwidth.
Right.
To do that. And so it's taken me a while to learn, the benefit of delegation and trusting your partners and people to get things done. And not every employee, not every partner works out. Sometimes it's not the right fit, and it's best to just be open and honest and transparent about that. And
Hmm.
if they need to move on, that's okay. Like that's true of
Right.
most founders. Like teams go through all these transitions, and that's a healthy thing.
Hmm.
So anyway, just not being afraid of that and sort of being aware of it, I think is important.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, it's just there's some people who take the short view and some people who take the long view. Like
Yeah.
like even if we look at Tesla stock, I mean, it's crazy that it's as low as it is, right? I mean, it's not related to what we're talking about with decentralized systems, but I mean, clearly this guy Elon Musk is going to be the first to autopilot, right? He's going to get huge market share. It's so obvious that in 10 years that company is going to be worth way more than it is right now, but everybody's just looking at, well, what is it going to be, what are they going to deliver next quarter?
Mm.
Why would you even think about next quarter with a company like Tesla? You know what I mean? So the people I feel like that don't get Bitcoin are people that are thinking about the next quarter.
Mm.
These are the obvious investor or investment seekers. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
it really, it really does take someone with a long view to understand kind of what you and I are discussing right now. So I think that's quite important. And the long
Mm.
view is very holistic generally. So yeah, I mean, what are you investing in now? Generally, what protocols are you most excited about? What do you think is the most interesting thing going on in the space right now?
So there's this whole new generation of protocols that's coming out, right? We're about to see the launch of Hedera Hashgraph. You've got Algorand coming out soon. Like um, all of the work that people really put their money and time into in 2017 is starting to bear a lot of fruit, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of those projects that got funded back then, not all of them went away. A lot of them have been heads down building great tech, right? And it's taken year, 2 years to deliver on that tech, right? We're looking towards the launch of Telegram, right? Is coming soon, and now we've seen the announcement of Libra, right, for next year. So all of that wave of technology is coming, which I think really represents one, a maturity of the technology.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see a lot more scalability in 2020 with all of these systems, and also specialization. I
Mhm.
think if people have finally come to the conclusion that not everything can be built on one system,
Mhm.
Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other system, we're going to have to specialize, just like programming language, just like anything else.
Mhm.
We're going to have to specialize the tools based on the need and the use case, right? There are some use cases where you need an extreme level of security. There's
Mhm.
some use cases where you don't,
Mhm.
and you might care about extremely low micro fees. You might care about instant versus waiting an hour, right? So it
Mhm.
all depends on what use case you're serving. And so I think that's all good. And as far as what I'm most excited about, it's the decentralized systems that are popping up. So I've been spending a lot of time in the PegNet community. So
Mhm.
these are pegged assets on top of Factum for stable coins and gold and crypto. Basically, anything that has a public market price,
Mhm.
you can peg one of these assets to. And the cool thing is, I mean, there have been a lot of stable coins, but effectively all have similar challenges, right? There's the reserve problem,
Mhm.
like, okay, do I trust the person holding the reserve? Even the decentralized ones like DAI, there's a 16% stability fee.
Mhm.
Like these systems sort of have a lot of challenges. And with PegNet, it's the first system I've seen that the user self issues the asset.
Mhm.
It's fully auditable,
Mhm.
so you can burn factoids and turn them into pegged assets, and there's no conversion fee.
Mhm.
The prices are kept set by these oracles that are using proof of work mining,
Mhm.
and so that's simplified so much of the concept of how do you validate the right oracle prices. People burn electricity. That's their proof that it's the right amount. We're using the good old fashioned proof of work way to do it.
Mhm.
So fully decentralized, fully auditable, self-issued, and a whole, like they've got 30 of the top assets from fiats to cryptos to gold and silver that you can issue against. So it's this whole network of stablecoins that's emerging. It's sort of like a mirror, a digital mirror of the real economy, right? And so I think stuff like that is so exciting because that's something I've wanted to exist for almost 7 or 8 years. I remember writing an email to Mike Hearn
Mhm.
back in 2012, 2013. It's like, hey, how do we get assets on the blockchain? And just the tech wasn't there yet. Like, oh yeah. Just we're getting they were just getting multi-sig out
Mhm.
the door at the
Right.
time, right? And he's like, let's get that done, and then we can push it forward. But having funded the Omni protocol and sort of seeing the evolution of all these assets, the fact that the tech is finally there for sort of the ideal state of a fully decentralized version is hugely powerful, and something that I think will grow really fast,
Mhm.
because it lower. What happens is you're lowering the barriers,
Mhm.
right? The is CPU mined, so you don't get any advantage from an ASIC or a GPU because it's actually RAM limited. So you have to have
Okay.
2 gigabytes of RAM. That's the bottleneck, not the computation
Mhm.
in the algorithm. It uses an algorithm called LXR hash,
Mhm.
and that's really exciting to me because I remember those days in crypto where like anybody could just run it on their laptop,
Mhm.
right? And you could get a few of the units, and you could play around with them and send them and learn about it.
Mhm.
Before, like you could only buy it on an exchange, or you had to be a big industrial miner to
Right.
participate. And so hopefully the algorithm they picked will last for a while before somebody figures out some bright optimization. But it's sort of been this, if you look at the history of computer science, there's always been a tension between computation and RAM, and getting their proximity and optimization. And so they've picked something that's been unoptimized for 4 decades.
Mhm.
So maybe it'll last a little bit longer. But I'm hoping that golden period lasts at least 6, 12, 18 months, where anybody can participate in the system, anybody can secure it, anybody can literally mine some digital gold, right? A
Yeah.
token pegged to gold. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean that's a good idea, but I feel like we've seen this before with Litecoin. They tried to do a memory hard algorithm, and then they said, oh, because it requires a lot of memory, nobody can build an ASIC for it. But then when Litecoin got some considerable market cap and it became the silver to Bitcoin's gold, there were ASICs, you
Sure.
know? So I feel like as soon as market cap as soon as it's worth it to make an ASIC, people will figure out an ASIC, you know? And now,
True, true. But let me point out, it's amazing to me, Litecoin, and I'm a friend of Charlie. He's a nice guy, but they're not working too much on the development. It amazes me that it's worth $4 or $5 billion, right? It
yeah,
is a testament to the network effect.
yeah,
It has such a prominent position despite sort of mostly following the code merges and everything of Bitcoin, right?
hmm,
There's not a lot of active development. They're not trying to change or add features. They're sort of, like you said, acting as that silver to this gold. And so if nothing is accomplished but creating a massive persistent network effect
hmm,
of people that are vested in it, and somebody figures out some optimization, like, that's not a bad outcome. I have a friend that jokes, any problem that's a problem after you have $1 billion market cap is not a problem.
right. It's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. And the more recent example is the folks at Ravencoin.
Hmm,
So big fan of Ravencoin, and they did a similar approach, picking CPU mining, and it took
hmm,
a while for somebody to come up with the GPU.
hmm,
And as far as I know, and the hash rate's been increasing recently, nobody's come up with an ASIC yet, and maybe somebody will,
hmm,
in the next year or so. But they've already built this really active, really engaged base of people the
hmm,
last year and a half, and it effectively started for nothing, and now has 130 million market cap. It's not the biggest project, but wow,
hmm,
look at that return for the people that took some risk early on and got involved.
yeah.
That's great, right? And that's maybe not scalable if you're a $1 billion hedge fund, but I'm more concerned about the people that are learning about this and the developers that are trying to build something new and get them a reward for what they're doing.
Right. What are your thoughts on proof of stake?
So proof of stake is proved really tough. I remember conversations back in 2013 on the Bitcoin forums where people were like, I wonder if proof of work will be around for another year or two. And here we are in,
Hmm,
2019 is still the main algorithm used for Bitcoin and Ethereum. And Ethereum has as one of its set goals to move to proof of stake. And they've done an enormous amount of work
hmm,
towards pushing in that direction. The challenge with proof of stake is every conceivable way that somebody could try to fake out the algorithm,
hmm,
right? And as Vlad used to say, if you want to solve proof of stake, you have to put something at stake.
hmm,
And so most of the solutions have come to, okay, it's not enough to just hold a little bit for a little bit of time. You have to hold a larger amount. You look at the staking on Dash or stuff like that. I mean, the master nodes, it's a pretty significant investment now to run a master node. It's like
hmm,
$250,000, $500,000 if memory serves, like the current number of Dash you need to stake to sort of get those full rewards. And then the second thing has been, you got to lock it up for a certain amount of time. And if you were an attacker or a bad actor, or you're trying to validate the wrong blocks, you lose the stake.
hmm,
But that introduces a whole nother set of problems, like who says that you did the wrong thing, and that's an attack vector that somebody could take your stake. So having something at risk it's proved really complex
hmm,
to try to figure that out. And there have been projects that have done it well. Decred was one of the first. Dash
hmm,
was one of the first. I'm big fans of both projects, and they've managed to move a lot of governance on chain, which I think is really healthy. A lot
hmm,
of times, you've got 5 developers, and at their whim, the protocol is what they say it is, right?
right.
So a lot of people had a very negative experience around Bitcoin Core with that, and so that was part of the reaction that created Dash and Decred and other projects. And so I think it's really important. Good work is being done. It will get out there, but it creates a lot of complexity.
Hmm,
And I think some people should be humbled
hmm,
by how much complexity was there that we didn't sort of expect or foresee back in the early days. So I'm optimistic. I like the protocols that use it.
hmm,
I think it should be used more.
hmm.
But it's taken a lot longer to get that balance right than I think we expected. Let's call it 5 or 6 years instead of a year or two.
Yeah. One thing that a friend of mine was mentioning to me, my friend Eric, he mentioned something called, it's basically pool staking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of pool mining, because he actually works for F2 Pool now.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, like if you want to stake, let's say on Ethereum or Tezos or whatever proof of stake cryptocurrency you want, but you don't have, I don't know, let's say $10,000, right? You can put in a small amount with a pool staking validator that will hold your
Yep.
stake for you. And I mean, there are ways, I think, of doing it. It's nice that you call it a challenge. There are challenges to be resolved, but one of the things that I see with proof of stake is that it completely resolves, the ASIC disparity, right? Like once the cryptocurrency goes mainstream, then yeah, the 95% of the rewards are going to a few mining pools and a few massive mining farms. You know what I mean? And most and everyone else, I mean, they're not going to be mining on whatever computer they own, be it a mobile phone or a laptop. So from my perspective, I think that it's worth resolving, because if you resolve that problem, then you have a currency that has way more circulation,
Sure.
right? If everybody can participate in receiving rewards, right? Then now as a consumer, okay, this currency is accepted by 1 billion people. This currency is primarily accepted by these 10 miners, right? So I mean, it's obvious that circulation adds to the value of your currency.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm kind of, I understand that it's still not fully baked, but I see a tremendous value in proof of stake, because it there's no way you can build an ASIC for staking your cryptocurrency, right? There's no way that you're going to spend $1,000 because you're a smart person and you know how to use this special computer, and then you're going to have $100,000 worth of performance, right? And that's kind of what's happening in the Bitcoin space. If you buy a Bitmain Antminer or something, right, and you know how to use it, because I don't think my mom could buy an Antminer and figure out how to use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, I don't think some Indian merchant selling beans on the street could figure out how to use an Antminer, and I don't think he could afford it. I don't think he could. He would have the electricity for it. It's a massive infrastructure issue. It's a massive barrier to entry. And so that's why I think proof of stake, maybe it's complicated, but it's worth doing, in my view.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the proof of stake platforms, and I think it'll get there. You just have to be aware of the choices and trade-offs that systems make when they do it. And maybe the one thing I would say is specialization is always going to be a thing. We can't get away from the fact that some people have more knowledge than others, because knowledge is specialized, right? I've spent 15,000 hours reading crypto, blockchain, decentralized forums, chats, videos, etc. the last 7-8 years. And there's no way to transport all of that knowledge to 8 billion other people, right? And so I'd say there's room for both. I want systems that have the least friction for as many people to participate as possible, right? And that should be the goal, right? And we're getting there. The interfaces are so much better than when I started. I remember downloading Bitcoin QT in 2012, right? Full node, and 2 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes, whatever at the time. And I tried to convince some other friends to download it, and they didn't want to figure it out. They never heard of SourceForge. They didn't know what this thing was. It took 2 days to download on their home laptop, and they just whatever, And Today, you have beautiful app interfaces from Exodus and blockchain and other popular wallets that have tens of millions of users. You have, interfaces from Coinbase and other exchanges that made it super simple. I mean, Coinbase, the fact that they have more users than Charles Schwab
Wow.
is incredible. And that was last year, and I think they just
Mhm.
crossed 30, 40 million users. And Charles Schwab is like 15 million, right? So already they've made investing more accessible to more people with an easier interface than one of the largest brokerages in the United States, right? So we're getting there. Like
Mhm.
it's getting
Yeah.
easier and easier. We've come a long way, and I'm pretty optimistic that it'll get so easy that it's just going to be something that happens in the background, right?
Mhm.
So look at examples like Nodal
Mhm.
or Open Garden, where you can literally share the internet from your device or
Mhm.
share data that you're collecting about IoT devices. All of this has value, and it's just getting baked into the back end of applications, and you'll be racking up a little balance of Nodal or OG, depending on the information that you're willing to share or getting paid to share. And that's, I think, going to be a big shift, right? Today, tech companies make money off of our data,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
a lot of the laws and everything is moving towards, hey, people want to get paid for their data or they're going to opt out.
Right.
And most people probably don't care about a lot of the data. Okay, my phone saw there were 4 electric scooters on the corner. To me, doesn't matter. To
Mhm.
somebody who's doing advertising, they're willing to pay for that. Great.
Mm.
I'm happy to push that button and share that information, right? But I might be extremely paranoid about my financial information or whatever that I
Mm.
want to hold closely. And so I should have that option. And blockchain is giving us that ability to have that granularity and also
Mhm.
practically do the payments, because how did you reward people before, right? You didn't have a cheap way of doing that. And so, it was kind of just toggle, yes or no, do this or don't, right? And so I think we're going to see a wave of applications that are going to allow for better privacy or to get paid
Mm.
for the information that you don't care about being private.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean it's all about, yeah, I agree. It's all about the opt-in,
Yep.
it's a very sort of a wu-wei type of perspective, to have people not being forced into something that they didn't agree to. And now there maybe they have an opt-out, right? The opt-out is delete your Facebook account,
Right.
right? Just don't chat with all your friends and family and everyone else.
Sure.
Just don't use it. That's the opt out. Oh, you
Yep.
want to use it because everyone else is using it. Oh, okay. Well, then you have to make all of these compromises. You
Yep.
know what I mean? So I feel like, yeah, the opt in approach is, clearly something that has value.
Sure.
Um, Outside of financial technology, because I feel like that's primarily been the focus of our discussion so far, but from my perspective, I got into distributed systems when I was in China, because I observed that you can't really block a torrent stream with a firewall. you know I was a system administrator. I was running like I think it was a 40 gate or a 40 net firewall in some company, and I was doing traffic shaping, and there was a bunch of stuff that you could do to minimize the damage of a torrent on your network. But
Mhm.
you can't block a distributed hash table
Right.
with 20 million dynamic IPs. I mean, it's just
Right.
not going to happen. So I observed that distributed systems with no central servers are censorship resistant, right? And for someone living in China, who's thinking, well, this has massive human rights implications, right?
Right.
To bring a free press to a market like that, I think would be quite disruptive. And so, nowadays there's IPFS and there's Swarm from Ethereum, which is basically the same thing as IPFS. I don't know why they duplicated all that effort. Maybe they're doing something different, but I don't know exactly what it is. But whatever. So what do you think about decentralized file systems and using content addressing and having a serverless internet? What is your view on that? Kind of the Web 3.0 ideology, you know?
Well, I think it's inevitable that these systems will sort of break down a lot of barriers for people to access information. And that's been sort of the grand story of the web in general,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think the internet has done more for free speech than
Mm-hmm.
all the laws ever passed
Mm-hmm.
by any government, because it was de facto free speech. There isn't a easy technical method, and sort of people have tried to come up with elaborate technical methods to stop the flow of information. But the famous thing is, right, any censorship to the web just looks like damage and it routes around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So information finds a way. Sort of the joke from Jurassic Park, right?
Yeah.
Life finds a way.
Yeah.
Information finds a way. So I mean, that's one of the amazing things about the blockchain, is it's going to really sort of open up information. But I think the quote by Paul Snow is probably the best. If you've ever read the Factum white paper,
Mm-hmm.
the subtitle is "Honesty is Subversive," right?
Mm.
And that's the simple idea that everybody wants people to be honest with them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even if they don't want to be honest with others, everybody wants people to be honest with them, right? Including governments and entities that are giant enterprises. They want their employees to report what really happened, and they want the people in the system to be honest. And so a really cool example we saw in China of honesty was TikTok ended up using Factum via this notary service in Hangzhou for all of its copyrights. And so they were recording all these notarizations with this platform, and those hashes were being secured into Factum, and of course anchored into Bitcoin, and now these days Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually there was a dispute
Mm-hmm.
where Baidu came out and said, that we didn't infringe on your copyright, and TikTok's like, yeah, you did, and so it ended up in court, and eventually it came down to the proof that TikTok had notarized and blockchain secured these copyrights and these sort of way that they were doing their videos. And the court decided, yeah, that's proof, right? And Baidu is like, no, blockchain's not proof. That doesn't count. And so it got appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court in China.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I think it was 2018, the court came back and was like, yep, blockchain is proof, and that's amazing, right? As far as I know, it was the first major Supreme Court to take a view. I mean, in the US, there's, I think it's the UIDA Digital Signatures Act back from the early 2000s that sort of settled that in the US, that digital signatures are proof and have the same weight as physical signatures. So that wasn't as much of a debate in the US and Europe, but for China, right, it could have gone either way. So it's pretty amazing to see just such a basic example of being able to prove history, right? Brian Deary, the chief scientist of Factum, loves to say that effectively what we're doing is breaking Orwell's dictum. Do you remember if you ever read 1984? Right? Orwell's thing was, well, whoever controls the present controls the past.
Right.
Whoever controls the past controls the future, right? Sort of, if you can change the records, if you can change the history, I owned this piece of land or this building, and you can alter the record now, and that changes the perceived history, and therefore, now I can sell this house because I owned it. That's going away. You will no longer, in the present, be able to change the information about the past. And that has really powerful implications.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about distributed ledger technology, blockchain. These are essentially conflict-free replicated data types. These are systems by which millions, potentially even billions, or even an unlimited number of computers can share a consistent view of history. That's the whole point of this technology. Is that everybody can say, this is the history that everyone else agrees to, and I've verified all the mathematical proofs on my own computer and confirmed that, yes, all of this is true. So now I also agree with this consistent view of history, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this technology, honestly, right? I mean, Bitcoin, 7 transactions per second. It's decentralized. It takes 10 minutes, on a good day to get like 15 verifications and to really, get a transaction done. This is not an advancement, actually, unless you care about censorship resistance, right? Unless you care about a consistent view of history. If you don't care about those things, then, get a MySQL server, you know what I mean? And just, get an offsite backup, and it'll be way better. It's way better performance. The old systems, of a centralized infrastructure is actually better in many ways. It's not like Bitcoin. The advantage of Bitcoin is not that it's snappier, right? That's not the point. The point is exactly what you said. It's sharing a consistent view of history with everyone on the network. That's the whole point.
Whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I actually wrote a Medium post a while back about blockchain as the beginning of recorded history.
Mm-hmm.
Because exactly that, right? Now you can actually validate and verify what's happening. And, at first that was just the ability to, validate particular transactions, but now we're getting these systems to the point where we can connect not only transactions, but all this real world data, whether it's market prices, or I took my my first daughter's birth certificate, and I hashed it and I placed it in the Factom blockchain, and so she's the first provable human, to my knowledge.
Awesome.
At least as much as a birth certificate is, a proof of existence. And so, it's stuff like that. Like all these records are going to move to blockchain systems. Anything worth securing, anything you carry about the history for, whether it's a mortgage record or a land record or your financial information, it's all going to move onto these systems. So it's going to be really interesting to see that evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I think we've covered a lot of ground, honestly. I mean, we talked about what you're most interested in. We talked about the censorship resistant aspect of this technology. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover?
Well, I think it'd be interesting to spend a minute exploring sort of how people can participate in these systems.
Absolutely.
And so I usually recommend that people get involved in the area which they have the most comfort and expertise. So if you're a software developer, pick up an open source project. Come work on PegNet. Come work on one of these early stage open source protocols, and cut your teeth on it. There's no substitute for just jumping in, getting in that Discord channel, seeing what the community is building, and really participating. As long as the algorithm holds, mining is something that I hadn't done much of until recently. I got into Bitcoin just late enough where like GPUs and ASICs were near on the horizon, and I was like, nah, I'm just gonna buy versus mine, and that proved to be a good approach. But there are now these mining systems, whether it's Nodal on your phone or buying an OG open garden router and earning tokens that way, or doing something like the CPU mining. I expect there'll be pools fairly soon for people that want to jump into CPU mining of PegNet. And so, if nothing else, you learn how to download the software, use a wallet, earn a few of these tokens. You can send them around. That will give you more knowledge than 99% of people.
Right.
So take a few hours, and go through the friction and the effort of signing up for these early systems, and that will be a massive benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely the general advice is get into this space, right? if you get into this space now and you hold, like I said, like we discussed earlier, right? Taking the long view. Obviously, this space is not it's not going away, right? This is not just some fad. It's like getting into internet startups in 1991. I mean, obviously that's a good idea. Do more of that, right? Download the software, learn how to use it, get into the community, do whatever you possibly can to enter into this space. Absolutely. And the question is how. Well, download a core wallet. I suppose that's one thing I did back in the day. And there's a lot of easy ways in. Having the currency, I think, is important. Even if you're just going to use blockchain.info on your phone. Is it still? No, it's blockchain.com now, right? Yeah, they changed the name,
Yep.
but anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Just having some easy wallet solution, and go to an ATM, buy some from your friends. If you're willing to give up your government issue ID to an exchange, set up an exchange account, just buy some. You're right. It's way easier than mining, right? Mining, I wouldn't recommend to anybody, well, if you want to get into Bitcoin or crypto, you have to get an ASIC miner and figure it out. And no, that's nonsense, right?
Yep.
Just buy some and hold it. It's not going to be worth less. I mean, people are like, yeah, but it's so volatile, right? It's volatile, in the next 3 months. You don't know what it's going to be worth in 3 months. But if you look at the price of Bitcoin, in 5-year tranches, right, nothing outperforms it. It's ridiculous, right?
Exactly.
If you'd have bought at the top of the last Bitcoin bubble 5 years ago, and you'd have sold at the bottom of the most recent bust, right, you would have made a lot more money than if you had invested in any other publicly traded stock, right? So but that's just the kind of the get rich quick scheme of it. It's a get rich in 5 years scheme. Honestly, it's a get rich in 10 years, right? And that's what people need to appreciate, is getting in any way you can, just by buying some. I think is obviously a good idea.
Yep.
So
I think that's a great note. And volatility is a word people use when the price goes down.
Yeah.
Appreciation is a word that they use when it goes up, right? And so, there's no guarantees, but taking that long view, not trying to day trade it, but instead to really hold it based on its fundamental value. I mean, you just got to ask yourself a couple questions. Are people going to use digital money in the future? I think it's a very safe yes. Will they use blockchain systems? I think that's a very safe yes. Are we today at 40, 50 million users, and there are 8 billion humans, almost? That's how early we are, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's 91 or 95, it's early days, right? And so we've got a long way to go. And the sooner you make that transition from the analog economy to the digital economy, the better off you'll be. And the last thing I'll say is, people have this fear about everything being done by AI and robots in the future. Well, let me break it to you. This is the machine economy.
Right.
Blockchain is a peer-to-peer machine economy. And if you want to buy into the machine economy, blockchain is the way you do that, right? This is the monetization of all the world's open source, decentralized robotic systems.
Yeah.
And so if you're afraid of that, then by all means, put some of your value into this. Sort of staying in the analog world isn't going to serve you well. Effectively, you're betting the machine economy is going to outpace the human-only economy, and that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah. And honestly, I really have a hard time with that fear. of, oh, hang on, so we're going to automate everything and now nobody's going to have to do shit they don't want to do just for money anymore. And this is a problem. You're afraid of this.
Right.
You're afraid of not having to flip burgers anymore. But whatever. I mean,
Right. People will adapt.
Yeah.
Like, we're not farmers anymore. Like,
exactly.
2% of the population is. I'm happy that I don't have to be a subsistence farmer in 500 AD and try to eke out slightly more calories than I consume.
Yeah.
Like, that was a really tough life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it might have been nice for the aristocracy, and they built a few Roman baths and some stadiums, but for the most part, it was a tough life, right? So moving from agriculture to manufacturing was a huge improvement, and we're not even manufacturing mostly. I don't work in a factory. My dad doesn't work in a factory. People have moved into a service economy. They've moved into an information economy, right? So the idea that those even information and services will be more and more improved, I'm not afraid of it. Like, that's led to these massive increases. I think where the fear comes in is where people don't feel like they can participate. Like, this is just something for the super rich, or this is just something for the experts. And it goes back to your point about making this the most accessible thing that we can.
Yeah.
Because then it's going to be a thing for everybody. Everybody that has a phone, everybody that has a laptop, everybody that can learn and deal in these systems. That's something that's really inclusive. In fact, that's the opposite of the current system, where there's a few entities that have a little magic printing press, and they make all the free money in the system, and they get the first benefit. Right, of all that money. I mean, you look at the financial sector, it's like 35%, I think, of all corporate profits come from 10% of the GDP, which is the financial sector. Like, they literally make money. Like, it's today absurdly concentrated. And so to instead get to a system where it's extremely diffuse, right? I think it was Lord Acton that was like, power and its concentration is tyranny, and in its distribution, liberty, right? So that whole idea, that's a very old idea. The more we can distribute power, the better off everybody's going to be, and they'll be more empowered.
Yeah, one issue that I see, kind of is sort of an architectural issue, is that when we concentrate power, we're not really building a pyramid, right? We're building a water tower. We're building something where it's a tall structure with a lot of weight right at the top, right? And then what happens with a water tower type structure is that eventually it gets wobbly, right? That volatility, those ups and downs in the market, those booms and busts, that's because of centralization, right? If you build something that's like a pyramid where value trickles up, right? If you had something like a universal basic income, essentially based on crypto, where you distribute all the money gets issued to just everybody, and then companies that add value to the market get to capture that basic income from the consumers that all have money, right? Now you've created actually a stable economy that isn't wobbly at all, right? So that trickle up structure, if we want a stable pyramid, that's how you do it, right? Is by flattening it out, by decentralizing it.
Yeah, no, it's very clear that that's a much more stable and inclusive way forward. And I wrote a whole post on, can UBI be ethical? And if we use force of violence in the form of state taxation to accomplish it, I don't think so.
Right.
But I really like the idea that's being pioneered by Amit from Silicon Valley Blockchain Society, SVBS, of universal earned income. And how do you do that using blockchain? And so they're working on a project right now that will basically put universal earned income into anybody's phone that wants it. And then you're monetizing all of your data. And you're doing exactly what we talked about earlier. So that's coming. And, I think that's the right approach. It's not, let's all get involved in politics and, rally to
Yeah.
using government force to force the wealthy to give us more money, or the free units created in the systems which somehow in this complex way flow back to people. No, I think it was just going to be something you can opt into, and who wouldn't opt into that, right?
Yeah.
So
Honestly, I think another way to do it that might be a little bit simpler, a little bit more, a little bit easier to build would be to just have a transaction fee of something like 10%. Right? That's it. Everybody pays a transaction fee, and all those rewards get redistributed on the most equitable basis possible. That's kind of something that I'm toying around with. And I'm sort of in the process of building a prototype. So maybe once that's ready, you'll take a look at it. Okay, so how can people find you? How can people reach out to you? How can do you want people to reach out to you over LinkedIn or Twitter, or what is your website? I mean, if people have an idea that they want to pitch you, how do they get a hold of
LinkedIn
you?
is probably so LinkedIn is probably the worst way to get me.
Okay.
I get a lot of messages there. I have 11,000 people or whatever that follow me on LinkedIn. So you feel free to add me, but that's not where I engage. Email is usually the easiest. David
Hmm.
at yeomans.capital.
Okay.
Pretty easy to find, and
Mhm.
that's my family office email. Everything flows in to there. If you meet me at a conference, or I entrust you with my phone number, it's going to be Signal.
Mhm.
Is going to be the easiest way to communicate with me. I
Mhm.
prefer open source and decentralized communications technologies.
Mhm.
And so, if you're messaging me on Facebook or,
Right.
some proprietary stuff, I hardly ever check that, or
Right.
Telegram or anything. So, if you want to contact me, use something that I'm actually willing to engage on. So for me, that's Signal and email. And I go to a lot of the conferences. I speak at a lot of the conferences.
Mhm.
I'll be at DevCon this year, not speaking. That's almost all technical presentations, but I'll be attending. I'll be speaking at the Global Blockchain Summit in Shanghai here in a week or so.
Mhm.
And so that should be a lot of fun. And yeah, I think I've spoken at like 80 conferences so far. So I'm
Awesome.
not too hard to find, and not hard. Happy to engage. I think you know part of what I can do is give entrepreneurs a lot of donate a little scar tissue that I've
Right.
accrued from similar experiences the last 20 years as an entrepreneur and an investor. So yeah, but happy to engage with people. But if you want to pitch me something, look at my website. It says pretty explicitly like what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
It's got to be open source. It's got
Right.
to be decentralized. It's got to
Mhm.
be peer to peer. It's got to be on a blockchain. Like,
Right.
I get a lot of pitches of things that are like adjacent. Don't you want a
Yeah.
healthcare play on our app? Like, no. So take a few minutes. Yeomans.capital is the website.
Mhm.
Super simple website, but shows you the portfolio of things that we've invested in. Like, if you look like those protocols, that's probably something we're going to be interested in. And just generally, we tend to focus on the infrastructure
Mhm.
as opposed to like user applications and things like that.
Mhm.
So just keep that in mind. Everybody wants an exception to that. Like, oh, you gotta, do higher.
Right.
No, like, I know what I know, and I know protocols. I know
Right.
infrastructure. And so if you look at the list, a lot of it's pretty base level stuff, right? It's Factum running data integrity for the blockchain, and it's Abacus building the core legal tech for security tokens, or Smart Valor with their exchange and sort of the decentralized approach they've taken to having the Valor token, and all the things that they're doing. It's stuff like that,
Right.
and we don't usually go for equity. We're all
Mhm.
about tokens. Like, I've already converted my worth into the digital economy. I'm not going to go back. And
Right.
some of that is tough for entrepreneurs, because like maybe they have a cool idea, but they're not willing to leave the US. And so they're
Mm.
like morphing their corporate structure into this really complex thing, because the lawyers have told them they need to do these 50 things before they can be a utility token. Honestly, I don't know if you can really do that. It's tough to launch a utility project in the US now without massive resources
Hmm.
to overcome all of the requirements
Hmm.
for already being in mainnet and already fully decentralized and all of these things. A lot of the early projects have sort of been grandfathered in, but
Hmm.
being a new project, I hate to break it to you, you're probably going to need to go to Crypto Valley. You know,
Right.
Ethereum was not built in North America.
Right.
The foundation's in Switzerland.
Hmm.
Half the world's blockchain projects are in Crypto Valley.
Right.
Let that sink in. That's the rest of the world combined
Hmm.
equals Switzerland, right? So if you are a smart developer and you want to build one of these decentralized systems, seriously consider going to Crypto Valley. If it was 1999, I
Hmm.
would be moving to Silicon Valley.
Okay.
It's 2019, I'm moving to Crypto Valley, right?
Mm.
So there's a lot of great developers in North America, but that's not a friendly jurisdiction. Let's just be honest.
Right.
It's been very confusing, a lot of gray area. The guidance has come very, very late. Only recently have we gotten some of the guidance, and the guidance we've gotten is very difficult to follow and requires enormous resources. So if you're a small startup, you
I'm not
might want to
clear.
seriously consider that.
I'm not clear exactly though on exactly where Crypto Valley is, because I know that Malta is also very friendly, and Estonia has they're offering like digital citizenship now.
Sure.
There,
And
there's
London is friendly, and
yeah.
Luxembourg is friendly, and Liechtenstein is friendly. What do all these jurisdictions have in common?
Hmm.
They're all in Europe.
Right.
But I would define Crypto Valley as the triangle of Zurich, Liechtenstein, and Zug.
Okay.
You could argue it extends to Geneva. You could argue it extends to other hubs in Switzerland.
Hmm.
Um, but really, I think the heart of it, most of the projects are in that triangle. So
Mm.
if I were to say Silicon Valley, what does that really mean? Some people would say it's San Francisco and Oakland and San Jose,
Right.
right? Give me all the stuff between there. That's Mountain View and Palo Alto and
Mm.
all of that, right? That's Crypto Valley, or rather Silicon
Silicon
Valley,
Valley.
right? So for Crypto Valley, I would say Zurich, Zug, and Liechtenstein, those three cities. Zurich is the biggest financial capital in Switzerland.
Hmm.
Um, and if you look at bearer assets in general, like
Hmm.
gold custody,
Hmm.
65% of the world's gold is physically held within 25 kilometers of Zug.
Wow.
That's incredible, right?
Mm.
And what it's done is it's shaped the laws, the regulations, the financial transparency. Everything is the highest caliber in the world for bearer assets. And I would point out that blockchain is a bearer asset. If
Mm.
you hold the private key, you hold the asset. So
Right.
it's not surprising that as crypto looked for the friendliest home in the world, they ended up in the friendly home of bearer assets.
Right.
And so for all of those reasons, it's also big enough. It's partly a scale thing,
Hmm.
right? Maybe Montana had the friendliest laws in a certain respect, but people didn't go there because there wasn't a big enough network effect, right? So you need
Right.
this compromise of California had friendly laws for Internet 1.0,
Hmm.
right, and friendly VCs, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, that's what I see in Switzerland. Is it's not the perfect jurisdiction in every possible way.
Hmm.
Maybe there's some micro jurisdiction here or there that has a better aspect here or there, but the scale's too small.
Right.
I don't have the engineer base. I don't have the in a 10,000 person jurisdiction or a 50,000 person jurisdiction, or even Malta at 400,000.
Hmm.
They're going to play a role, but I can't build a major company there. Like, major companies operate in Switzerland. Like, Google has some of its biggest offices in Zurich, right?
Mm.
There's the tech talent there. There's enough of a bench. It's a country of 8 million people. 4 million people a day commute into Switzerland.
Mm.
German cities, French cities, they're effectively suburbs of Switzerland, extensions of the Swiss economy. And so 12 million people is big enough.
Right.
It's a friendly jurisdiction with clear rules for utilities, for commodities, for securities. Like, what the rules are,
Hmm.
right? The rules aren't perfect, but and
There's
you've also
rules.
got the advantage of Liechtenstein is a different jurisdiction
Hmm.
and passports into all of the EU.
Right.
So you can sit in both.
Mm.
In fact, Liechtenstein defines presidents and residency within 200 kilometers.
Okay.
So you're probably not physically in Liechtenstein, but you qualify if you're in Zurich and Zug.
Oh,
So
wow.
so you can get the international with Switzerland, you can get the EU markets with Liechtenstein. That's a very powerful combination, and it's an hour train ride, right? It's shorter than going from San Jose to San Francisco, right? So I think that's a workable definition of why that area is so compelling, and
Mm.
so many people are moving there. So,
Are they moving there, or are they incorporating there? Because I feel like, the decentralized censorship resistant capabilities of these systems make it such that location is irrelevant. So I suppose, for an investor, you want to know, where are you incorporated, right? Where is your stock coming from, right? For you, that's important. But do you think that Zurich is the best city to go to meet like-minded, people that are interested in censorship resistant technologies? Or, I mean, personally, I wonder, if this
yeah.
technology is maybe not more relevant in a city like Hong Kong, that has real cause for concern about freedom of speech. Like, I wonder, where do you think this technology is most appealing, and you can build, you can find employees that really see the value of it philosophically and morally and ethically, and that are going to be really into it and really committed to it? Where do you think is the most, the best city to meet like-minded people, in your view?
Zurich and Zug.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So a couple of comments. Yes, we're moving into a decentralized world. No, it doesn't work everywhere.
Mm.
Just to be honest, there are physical network effects that are very important. And it's not enough to be incorporated there. And this is
Mm.
what everybody finds out when they really do the research is there are a lot of rules about where you're physically located and whether that counts
Mm.
as substance, whether you're substantively based there. It's not just an incorporation. The next step is having board meetings there. The next step of having your CTO and your intellectual property created there. There's all these rules that effectively say you can't really circumvent your physical location.
Mm.
Especially the US is very particular about that. And so you have to be willing to go there and look at the success path of Ethereum. You
Mm.
know, Vitalik was in Toronto. He knew a lot of developers and people in the North American jurisdiction.
Mm.
He realized he couldn't do it there. He got some smart advice, had to go to Switzerland, where he could create a foundation where they had legal clarity, where they could talk with regulators one-on-one and get an answer.
Mm.
And they spent $500,000 just on a law firm to give them a letter that said, yeah, this isn't a security in the US. That's the only reason they even opened it to US participants. They were going to close it, the
Mm.
crowd sale, to all US participants, and it was only going to be international. And you couldn't get that letter today. That's the sad thing, is it's gotten worse in the
Mm.
last 5 years. I know of a group that was trying to get like a letter from that, and doesn't matter how much you pay the lawyer, they think it's too gray. They won't even give you a letter. So
Right.
you effectively don't even have that option anymore. But he found great developers in North America. He found the friendly jurisdiction in Switzerland. And to your point, he then went to Asia. Vitalik landed there in 2015.
Mm.
He learned Chinese. He visited 100 Chinese cities. He went on this massive campaign, educated ministers and companies and investors and all these people. He joined a venture fund, Fenbushi Capital, so that they would invest in these decentralized applications. And that was the capital engine that drove Ethereum. So if I'm going to very generalize, it's great North American developers coupled with friendly European jurisdictions and funded by Asian capital. That is the success path today. And absolutely, I'm a huge fan of Hong Kong. It's an incredible city. Singapore, I think, is really coming up,
Mm.
especially with some of the concerns about what's happening. In other locations, people are moving to Singapore. A lot of the foundations are based there,
Mm.
but it's not the same. It's not the developer talent. It's the money, right?
Right.
And so I think you need all three. right? I've got an office here in Austin because I think it's the emerging mecca of US tech. And yeah, I go to California and Seattle and other places, but a lot of the startups are here, and I have a huge base of great engineers I can tap. But I'm opening an office in Zug because I
Mm,
need to be at the heart of Crypto Valley.
mm,
And I've already opened an office in Hong Kong,
mm,
right? So you have to be in all three of those places. But just be aware of where the specialization is. But here's the thing, you know, developers aren't going to stay in North America if this is not where the opportunity is. They're going to have to
mm,
spend at least a few years in Crypto Valley, launch, incorporate, accelerate, launch, go to mainnet, get listed. Now you have Smart Valor Live, so you have an exchange that's licensed through Liechtenstein and soon through Switzerland. You can go through that entire process, and when you have enough money,
mhm,
if you get enough scale, then you can afford to get through all the regulatory hurdles in the US. Like, the market's not going to go away. People are going to want to serve the US, but it's not where it's going to start. So everything's going to launch the first year or two in Switzerland.
mhm.
Start there, unless you're massively capitalized. If you can raise 50 or $100 million, more power to you. Probably you can launch through the US, but for most of us that don't have those deep pockets day one, you got to go somewhere where it's more friendly. So I'm going to spend more and more of my time being that bridge, encouraging people to come over. And I think what we need is, I'm writing a post about this right now. Um, a simple guide for how you set up and who to work with, and how to get housing, and all the things that just are the basics of okay, I'm going to go to Crypto Valley. What does that mean? How do I get there? How do I set up? How do I get running? But you've got accelerators now, all blockchain, like Crypto Valley VC, that have gone live. They just launched their first batch recently.
Mhm.
They're getting into batch 2 right now. So it's more than a post office box. That's definitely
Okay.
what it was in 2013. It was a post office box,
Mhm.
right? But now the accelerators are opening. Now the exchanges are live. Now the investors have moved there. Now, because of all the foundations, everybody does all their board meetings there.
Mm.
So it's easier to do conferences and everything else. And you're at the heart of all the other friendly jurisdictions. If your team is in Berlin, it's like an hour and 10-minute flight, right? If
Right.
you think London is the hub, like, it's right literally in the center of Europe, right?
Right.
All of the friendly Malta, okay, quick flight, right? So, that's, I think, a huge advantage. Increasingly I've been on these phone calls, and it's early morning for me, it's early afternoon for the guy in Switzerland, and it's late night for the guy in Hong Kong.
Right.
And to be, very honest, like, the guy in Switzerland's got the best time zone.
Right. Okay.
Either you got to get up super early or stay up super late, or you could be in the middle of this. And so we're going to see a hell of a shift. This
Mm.
is not a small movement, right? This is all the world's money. And I think the fact that Facebook is going to Switzerland for Libra is pretty telling, that they have no limitation on resources.
Mhm.
They have no limitation on lawyers and lobbyists and all the rest. And they came to the conclusion this had to be in Switzerland.
Right. Okay. Well, that's I guess very salient advice. Go to Switzerland. I didn't know that. I guess I'll have to find out what the winters are like there. Probably better than Canada. But
Little better than Canada. It's not
yeah,
as far north. It's right in Central Europe. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I wasn't aware. I knew that there were a lot of friendly jurisdictions, but I didn't actually know that like Zurich and Zug were considered like the crypto valley. Um, yeah, that's good to know. That's really cool. Yeah. Awesome.
yep.
Okay, great. Well, really, really, really appreciate you making the time. It's been great catching up with you. Yeah, so I guess for anyone who wants to pitch you cold, the best way to do it is via email. Um, yeah, great. Well, thanks again. And anytime you want to discuss anything else, let me know.
All right. Sounds wonderful. Good talking with you today.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.